Hey everyone, and welcome to the AnzenGuard Podcast. I'm Michael Reynolds.
And I'm Laura Wilson.
And we are so glad you're here with us today as we take a deep dive into identity theft.
Yeah, it's one of those things we all know is a risk, but it can be tough to wrap our heads around, how it actually works and what we can do to protect ourselves.
That's exactly why we're here today. We've gone through a ton of research articles, expert advice to break down this complex topic.
In a way that's clear, insightful, and most importantly, actionable.
Okay, so before we get into the how-tos, let's make sure we're all on the same page.
Right.
What exactly is identity theft?
At its core, identity theft happens when someone steals your personal information and uses it for their own gain, and the impact goes way beyond just your bank account.
Yeah, it can affect your ability to get loans, receive medical care, even file your taxes.
It can really throw your whole life into a tailspin.
And it's not just about draining your bank account. Thieves can use your information to open new accounts in your name, rack up debt, even commit crimes pretending to be you. Okay, so this is starting to paint a pretty unsettling picture. What kinds of information are these thieves after? What makes us vulnerable?
Well, it's a wide range, really. Your name, address, date of birth, social security number, online passwords, credit card numbers, driver's license, basically anything that can be used to verify your identity or access your finances.
So it's not just about being careful with our wallets and purses anymore. Our entire digital lives are at stake here.
Absolutely. And what's really fascinating is that the methods thieves use are constantly evolving. You've probably heard of phishing scams where they try to trick you into giving up your info through fake emails or websites.
Right, those can be really convincing, especially if they look like they're from a legitimate company.
Exactly. But then you've got data breaches where hackers break into company systems and steal massive amounts of information all at once.
And then there's this stuff that feels straight out of a spy movie.
Right.
Like skimming devices that steal your credit card info at ATMs or gas stations.
Or dumpster diving, where thieves literally go through your trash looking for documents with personal information. It's wild.
Okay, so based on all the research we've looked at, it seems like we can group these identity theft methods into a few main categories.
Okay.
What have you noticed, Laura?
Well, one big bucket is what I'd call tricking you. This includes things like phishing, but also phishing over the phone and phishing through text messages. It's all about manipulating you into giving up your information willingly.
Right. And then you have the more tech-heavy methods like hacking into systems through data breaches or using malware to steal your information.
Those are definitely becoming more common, especially as we all rely more and more on technology.
And then there's a category I'd call exploiting weak points.
Right.
This is where things like using public Wi-Fi without protection, having weak passwords, or even just losing your wallet can come back to bite you.
He's got it.
So it's a combination of being aware of the different tactics and making sure you're not leaving yourself vulnerable in any of these areas.
Exactly. And what stood out to me is that while there are a lot of ways identity theft can happen, the research also points to some key areas where you're especially vulnerable.
Like what?
Well, for example, did you know that 2023 was the worst year on record for data breaches? Millions of people had their information compromised, and a lot of that data ends up for sale on the dark web.
The dark web. That sounds ominous.
It is. It's essentially a hidden part of the internet where criminals buy and sell stolen information, and they don't exactly have ethical guidelines.
Wow.
And the prices for this stolen data are shockingly low. Your entire identity can be bought for less than the price of a cup of coffee.
Wow, that is scary. So even if we're super careful about phishing and other scams, there's still this underlying risk from data breaches.
Unfortunately, yes. We've seen some huge companies get hit in recent years. Ticketmaster, AT&T, even government agencies like National Public Data.
So it really highlights the need for strong security practices at every level, both for individuals and for organizations.
Absolutely. And here's another area where the research really surprised me: family identity theft.
You mean like someone stealing my kid's identity?
Exactly. It's a growing problem because children have clean credit histories, making them prime targets.
So a thief could use my child's social security number to open credit cards, take out loans, and basically ruin their credit before they even graduate high school.
It's a terrifying thought, but yes, that's exactly what could happen. And since kids aren't monitoring their credit reports, the damage can go unnoticed for years.
Wow, I had no idea this was such a prevalent issue.
It's definitely something parents need to be aware of. And it's not just children who are vulnerable. Seniors are often targeted as well, especially through phone scams and phishing emails.
So it's not just about protecting our own information, it's about looking out for our loved ones too.
Absolutely. And that leads to another really important point that came up in the research, the idea of repeat victimization.
Repeat victimization.
Yeah, it turns out that nearly 70% of identity theft victims are actually repeat victims.
So it's not a one-and-done kind of thing. Once
Yeah.
you've been targeted, you're actually more likely to be targeted again.
It's almost like the thieves know they can exploit certain vulnerabilities or patterns.
That's a scary thought, but it really emphasizes the need for ongoing vigilance. We can't just take steps to protect ourselves once and then assume we're good to go.
It's an ongoing process. We need to be constantly learning, adapting, and staying one step ahead.
Well said. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about what identity theft is, the different methods thieves use, and some of the key areas where we're most vulnerable.
Right.
But before we get into the specific steps you can take to protect yourself, there's one more type of identity theft.
Yeah.
I think we need to discuss synthetic identity theft.
Synthetic identity theft. That sounds intense.
It is. It's a more complex method, but it's becoming increasingly common. It's essentially where criminals create entirely fake identities using a mix of real and fabricated information.
So they might use your child's social security number, combine it with a fake name and address, and then use that to open accounts and build credit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what makes this so difficult to combat is that it often targets children and seniors who are less likely to be monitoring their credit reports.
Right.
So the damage can go undetected for years, and by the time it's discovered, it can be incredibly difficult to untangle.
It really can.
This is all pretty unsettling, to be honest.
Yeah.
It feels like no matter how careful we are, there's always some new threat lurking around the corner.
It can definitely feel overwhelming, but that's why it's so important to understand these different methods and how they work. The more knowledge we have, the better equipped we are to protect ourselves.
Well, on that note, when we come back in part 2, we're going to shift our focus to recognizing the warning signs that your identity might already be compromised.
Okay.
We'll talk about those red flags to watch out for so you can catch identity theft early on and minimize any potential damage.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back.
All right.
Welcome back to the AnzenGuard Podcast.
All right.
We've been digging deep into the world of identity theft, and this part of our deep dive, we're going to shift gears a bit. We've talked about how it happens and who's most at risk, but now let's focus on those early warning signs that your identity might already be compromised.
Right, because early detection can be just as important in minimizing the damage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about being proactive and knowing what to look for.
Absolutely.
So let's say you're diligently checking your bank statements and credit card bills.
Yeah.
What are some things that should immediately raise a red flag?
Well, the most obvious one is unfamiliar charges or withdrawals. If you see a transaction you don't recognize, don't just brush it off.
Right.
Contact your bank or credit card company immediately and inquire about it.
Right. And it's not just about those big splashy purchases.
Right.
Even small, seemingly insignificant charges could be a sign of something bigger going on.
Thieves often start small to test the waters before making larger purchases or opening new accounts.
So we're talking about anything out of the ordinary, no matter how small.
Exactly. It's better to err on the side of caution and investigate any suspicious activity.
Now, beyond those unfamiliar charges, what else should we be watching for in our financial statements?
Keep an eye out for any new accounts that you didn't open or any sudden changes in your credit limit that you didn't authorize.
Those are definitely major red flags that something's amiss.
Absolutely.
And what about our credit reports? Are there any warning signs there that we should be aware of?
Absolutely. If you see a sudden drop in your credit score, that could be a sign that someone has opened new accounts in your name or is using your existing credit.
Okay.
It's a good idea to check your credit report regularly.
Yeah.
You can get a free copy from each of the 3 major credit bureaus once a year.
And remember, you don't have to wait for something to feel wrong to check your credit report.
Right.
It's a good practice to review it periodically just to make sure everything is accurate and there are no surprises.
Good point.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about data breaches earlier.
Right.
What happens if you receive a notification that one of your accounts has been compromised?
Take it seriously. It means your personal information might be out there circulating in those shadowy corners of the internet.
Exactly.
Change your passwords immediately for any affected accounts and consider placing a fraud alert or even a credit freeze on your credit file.
So it's not just about reacting to the breach, it's about taking proactive steps to protect yourself from any potential fallout.
Exactly. You want to limit the damage as much as possible.
For sure.
Okay, so we've covered the financial side of things, but are there any red flags that might not be directly related to our money?
Yes, definitely. Pay attention to your mail. If you stop receiving bills or statements that you're expecting, that could be a sign that someone has changed your mailing address to redirect your mail.
Oh, wow, that's sneaky. They're essentially cutting off your access to information about your own accounts.
It is, and it can be really dangerous because you might not realize it's happening until it's too late.
So we're checking our bank statements, credit card statements, credit reports, and our mail. Anything else we should be keeping an eye on?
Keep an eye on your online accounts. Look for any unusual activity like login attempts from unfamiliar locations or password reset emails that you didn't request.
It's all about being vigilant and noticing anything out of the ordinary, whether it's related to your finances or your online activity.
Exactly. The key is to stay informed and be proactive about protecting yourself.
All right, so let's say the unthinkable happens. Despite our best efforts, we do become victims of identity theft. What's the first thing we should do?
Don't panic. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and helpless, but the most important thing is to act quickly.
Okay.
The first step is to contact your bank, credit card companies, and any other financial institutions where you think fraud might have occurred.
Okay.
They can help you close or freeze affected accounts and start investigating the situation.
That makes sense. So we're immediately trying to contain the damage.
Exactly. You want to stop any further fraudulent activity as soon as possible.
What else should we do?
The next step is to report the identity theft to the Federal Trade Commission. They have a dedicated website where you can file a report and get guidance on what to do next.
Okay.
This report is important because it creates an official record of the theft, and you might need it when dealing with creditors or law enforcement.
Okay, so we've contacted our financial institutions and reported the theft to the FTC. What about the police? Should we file a report with them too?
It's generally a good idea to file a police report as well. It provides another layer of documentation and can be helpful if the identity theft involved a physical crime, like a stolen wallet or a home burglary.
Okay.
Plus, some financial institutions might require a police report before they'll fully investigate the fraud.
All right, so we've got those three key steps. Contact financial institutions, report to the FTC, and file a police report. What comes after that?
Well, once you've taken those initial steps, it's time to start cleaning up the mess.
Okay.
This means reviewing your credit reports carefully, looking for any fraudulent accounts or activity. You can dispute any inaccurate information with the credit bureaus, and they're legally obligated to investigate and correct any errors.
So we have some recourse if our credit reports have been negatively impacted by the fraud.
Yes, absolutely. You have rights as a consumer, and the credit bureaus are there to help you resolve any issues.
Okay, what else do we need to do to get things back on track?
It's important to contact any companies where fraudulent accounts were opened in your name.
Okay.
You'll need to provide them with copies of your FTC report and police report, and they should be able to close those accounts and remove any fraudulent charges from your credit report.
Sounds like there's a lot of paperwork involved.
There can be, but it's important to be thorough and persistent. Don't be afraid to follow up with companies to make sure they're taking the necessary steps to resolve the situation.
And are there any resources or organizations that can help us navigate this process? It sounds pretty overwhelming.
Yes, there are definitely resources available to help you through it. The FTC website is a great starting point. They have a wealth of information on identity theft, including step-by-step guides, sample letters, and contact information for various agencies and organizations that can help.
Okay.
And don't hesitate to reach out to a credit counseling agency if you need help managing your finances or rebuilding your credit after identity theft. They can provide guidance and support during a really challenging time.
All of this is incredibly helpful. It sounds like recovering from identity theft can be a long and complicated process, but with the right information and support, it's definitely manageable.
Exactly. It's a challenging situation, but it's important to remember that you're not alone.
Right.
There are resources available to help you through it, and it's important not to blame yourself.
Yeah.
Anyone can become a victim of identity theft. The key is to take steps to protect yourself and to act quickly if you do experience fraud.
Well said. Now, in the final part of our deep dive, we'll focus on those concrete strategies and tips you can use to protect yourself from becoming a victim in the first place.
Sounds good.
We'll talk about everything from creating strong passwords to securing your online accounts, monitoring your credit, and safeguarding your physical documents.
All right.
We'll give you the tools you need to stay one step ahead of the scammers and keep your personal information safe.
Okay.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to the AnzenGuard Podcast.
Okay.
We've been exploring the ins and outs of identity theft, and now it's time to shift our focus to prevention.
That's right. We've talked about the warning signs and what to do if your identity is stolen, but now let's empower our listeners with some actionable steps they can take to stay safe.
Absolutely. Knowledge and proactive measures are our best defense against those scammers.
For sure.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What are some fundamental things everyone should be doing to protect their personal information?
Well, one of the most important things is to be mindful of what you share online, both on social media and on other websites. Think twice before posting sensitive information like your full birth date address or even your mother's maiden name.
Right.
That kind of information can be used by identity thieves to answer security questions and gain access to your accounts.
It's easy to forget how much information we casually share online, especially when we're caught up in the moment.
It really is, and it's not just about what you post publicly. Be cautious about the information you share with online retailers or service providers. Only provide the essential details they need for the transaction. You don't need to give them your life story just to buy a pair of shoes.
So less is more when it comes to sharing personal information. What about passwords, Laura? Any tips for creating strong ones that are hard for hackers to crack?
Absolutely. Use a combination of uppercase and lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols, and make sure your passwords are at least 12 characters long.
Oh, wow.
The longer and more complex, the better. And please don't use the same password for multiple accounts.
I know that's something I'm guilty of, but I'm trying to get better about it.
It's a common habit, but it's really important to break. If one of your accounts gets compromised, you don't want the hacker to have access to all of your other accounts.
Right.
And thankfully, there are password managers available that can help you generate and store strong, unique passwords for all of your online accounts. That takes the pressure off trying to remember a million different combinations.
Those can be a lifesaver. So strong passwords, being mindful of what we share online. What else can we do to boost our online security?
Two-factor authentication is a must-have for any sensitive account, like banking, email, or social media. It adds an extra layer of security by requiring a second form of verification, like a code sent to your phone or email, in addition to your password.
Okay.
And if you have the option, use an authenticator app rather than SMS for two-factor authentication. Those codes sent via text message can be intercepted.
That's a great point. Always opt for the most secure method available. Okay, we're building a pretty solid defense here. What about our physical documents and belongings? Any tips for protecting those from identity thieves?
Absolutely. Invest in a good shredder and shred any documents that contain personal information before throwing them away. Bank statements, credit card offers, even those pre-approval letters you get in the mail, shred them all.
Good old-fashioned shredding, still relevant in the digital age.
It is. And be cautious about your mail. If you're going to be away from home for an extended period, ask the post office to hold your mail or have a trusted neighbor collect it for you. You don't want sensitive documents sitting in your mailbox for days on end.
Good point. Now, I know we talked about the dangers of public Wi-Fi earlier. Any tips for staying safe when we're out and about?
If you must use public Wi-Fi, make sure it's a legitimate network. Don't connect to anything that seems suspicious or doesn't require a password. And for an extra layer of protection, consider using a VPN, a virtual private network. It encrypts your internet traffic, making it much harder for hackers to snoop on your activity.
So public Wi-Fi with caution and a VPN for added security. I know this is a topic we could talk about for hours, but I think we've given our listeners a really good overview of what identity theft is, how to recognize the warning signs, and most importantly, how to take steps to protect themselves.
I agree. It's all about awareness and proactivity.
Absolutely. And remember, if you do become a victim of identity theft, don't blame yourself. It can happen to anyone. The important thing is to act quickly and take the necessary steps to recover. We covered those in the previous parts of this deep dive.
Right.
And remember, there are resources available to help you through it. You're not alone.
Absolutely.
So to wrap things up, let's leave our listeners with 3 key takeaways. First, be vigilant about protecting your personal information online and offline. Second, take advantage of security features like two-factor authentication and strong passwords. And third, regularly review your bank statements and credit reports for any suspicious activity.
Excellent advice. Let's all stay informed and stay safe out there.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into identity theft. We hope you found it informative and empowering. And remember, knowledge is power when it comes to protecting yourself from these scams. And remember, you're listening to the AnzenGuard Podcast with me, Michael Reynolds.
And me, Laura Wilson. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode with your friends and family. Until next time, stay safe out there.